Alright guys, welcome back to another video, and I actually just want to tell you guys a story that happened to me in this tutorial, and that is this. Last night, some software came to me. It was the biggest software company in the world, and they were like, Bucky, you're the greatest programmer ever, so we want to tell you about a program we're making. We plan on building a robot that's going to replace every teacher in school. And I'm like, okay, well, what do you want me to do? And they're like, Bucky, we need you to build the brains for this robot. So I'm like, listen, leave me alone. I got this. So I rolled up my sleeves and I started coding. I'm like, okay, well, the teacher needs rules to go by. So what are they going to check for? Well, they're going to check for if the students studied enough, and they're also going to check if the students beat up kids, because that's the only two criteria and what makes a good student. So first, make a integer variable, say int hours studied, and for now, just by testing, we'll put it at like the optimal student studies for 60 hours a week at least. Now, let's go ahead and just write a comment right here. Like, okay, what makes a good student? A good student studies for like, I don't know, 10 or more hours a week. And this student just testing had studied 60, so that's good. Now, what else do we need to test for? We need to test for how many kids they beat up this week. So int kids beat up, and again, we're just testing, and we'll put 0 right now. And let me give myself a little space. And we'll say the rule for a good student is they have to beat up 0 kids. So in order to have a good student, they need to study for 10 or more hours, and also they need to have beaten up 0 kids. I don't think that's that much to ask for. So now what we need to do is we need to make a simple decision to allow our robot to go on something. So we can't just use two if statements, because we actually need to test all of these in one decision. If we're just testing for hours studied or kids beaten up, then we would need two if statements, but we need to test both of those things together. So how do we do that? Well, we do it like this. In your test, and actually let me go ahead and write the print first. So we'll print f and just put something like you are a good student. So basically, like I said, we need to test two things. So how do you test more than one thing? Well, in between your parentheses, give yourself a little space to work with, and in the first piece of the puzzle, you add the first test. So test 1. Now, what you do is you add two ampersand signs, and then in another set of parentheses, you add test 2. Now, what this is going to say is basically test two conditions. If both of them are true, and in this case, if they studied for 10 more hours and they beat up 0 kids, print out you are a good student. So hours studied, test if this is greater than 10, actually greater or equal to 10. And for test 2, test if kids beat up was exactly equal to 0. Or we can even say, well, that's the easiest way to say it. So basically, if this is true and this is also true, then print out you're a good student. And check it out, in this case, our kid beat up 0, studied for 60 hours, so it should print out you are a good student. Now, of course, if we have something like, okay, how many hours did he study? Well, he only studied 2 hours. How many kids did he beat up? Well, he actually beat up 9 kids that week. So, of course, if we try to run this, it would not run that code, because both of these were false and not true. Now, what if you're saying, okay, well, what if he was a really smart kid? What if he studied for actually 80 hours that week? However, he was in a bad mood. I don't know, maybe something happened to him, so he beat up 12 kids. Well, it says, okay, I'm going to test this. This one is true right here. Good job. You studied, the adequate amount of time. However, this is false. You beat up some kids, dude. So what's going to happen is this is true and this is false. So this entire thing is not going to run, because this only runs if both of these tests are true. So again, like I said, look at that. Even though he studied the proper amount of time, he beat up the kids, so that test was false. So again, the point of this tutorial And you know what? I have to tell you the truth. No software came to me. That was just an example. But anyways, the point of this tutorial is whenever you want to test more than one condition, then what you need to do is use those ampersand signs, and that means this has to be true and this has to be true, and if so, run this code. And another thing is you can use as many of these as you want. You can put ampersand test 3, test 4, test 5. Just separate all of your tests with these two ampersand signs. And what this would mean is this has to be true, and this has to be true, and this has to be true. If one of them is false, then this code doesn't run. So hopefully you guys enjoyed my tutorial. I'm going to go beat up some kids. I'll see you later.